What's a narcissist? Well, the big question is, are you one? Do you know one? That's going to be the two big questions that are on your mind as far as this is concerned. So to absolutely put your mind at rest as far as to whether you are one, it is actually normal for us all to have a moderate level of narcissistic traits. Okay, it's a means of self-protection. It's a means of a way to protect our own body, which is to say, well, if we didn't have some elements of selfish traits in terms of self-protection, we would find that it's really quite difficult to exist. So narcissistic traits in moderation are absolutely something that is perfectly fine and perfectly normal. And it's a developmental stage in childhood. It's normal at that particular stage when only the child notices that it exists, so in its level of importance. So only the things that impact that child, the child self, then as the things that are of any relevance or importance. So we can see that in very early stages of our development, the tantrum stage, that's really what those are about. And if we look at it in terms of adolescence, when we know everything, and teenagers and all that, where we make those jokes about, well, they know everything. Of course, when we're at the stage, I'm at the stage of knowing everything. Well, those are normal developmental stages that people pass through. So the issue is, some people never actually came out of that. And for some levels of narcissistic behaviour, certainly in my view, some are more obvious than others. Now, there is the version which is very obvious, and we'll go into the definitions of what that is in a moment. And there are some which are still as strong to be on the receiving end of, but are a lot more subtle, and we can't necessarily quite put our finger on it, and we don't quite get it or don't quite understand it, but we can feel that something's out of kilter and we're questioning it, and we need to find answers to that question. And so for you to be listening to me right now, that's most likely something that's going to be happening for you. Okay, so for an intuitive sensitive person, it is often the case that we were never allowed, really, to have tantrums. That may be something that's very familiar to you, or you think, well, actually I was allowed tantrums. Fantastic for you as an intuitive sensitive person. But for most, it is a situation where you weren't allowed tantrums, or there was shame as far as those were concerned. So why is that so? So if you had, as an example, or you think, maybe I have got elements of a narcissistic parent, doesn't mean to say that you have to then go and confront them and say, well, your behaviour was X, Y, Z. This is about you understanding yourself, and therefore adjusting and changing something for you. There is no point, absolutely no point, in going to poke at things as far as other people are concerned. Okay, but as an example, if you had a narcissistic parent as part of your upbringing, you would definitely not have been allowed the normal narcissistic developmental stage. Okay, you would not have been allowed the tantrums. Those would be an absolute flat no-no. Maybe part of it was that you would, those are embarrassing. So to a narcissistic personality, they want their child having a tantrum because that's far too embarrassing, and we don't do that in front of other people. All of that kind of thing. Or that they're the only person who was ever allowed a tantrum, in the other extreme, was the narcissistic parent. Okay, so they were the only ones who were allowed to shout, scream, holler, and wreck things. You weren't. And so if there were any signs of you going along those lines of having had enough, or the normal development stages, that would have been shut down very quickly. You would not have been allowed it, because there couldn't have been a situation where you were more important than the narcissist. The narcissist always has to be number one. And this will be familiar to you if you felt you had to grow up too soon. Okay, you will have regularly, at the same time, have felt emotionally terrified, wondering what's coming next, because everywhere in a narcissist's life there is a lot of drama. So if you find yourself now as an intuitive sensitive feeling engaged and having to be engaged when you're sorting out someone else's drama, then it's highly likely that you've come from some element of a narcissistic background. And you will have wondered exactly at times who the parent is. Okay, is it you, the child, or is it the adult? Because you would have found yourself at times parenting the parent. And you will now have terrible trouble trying to speak up. So when something, spotlight is on you, to speak up, to say something, to actually deal with something that has been bothering you or has got out of whack, it's got out of sync, you'll have terrible trouble trying to speak up to tell someone that needs to adjust and change. And you'll wonder when you often wonder why, when life stops at some point, you're having to deal with dramas of other people's making, because you find yourself sorting dramas of other people's making. Now, this is particularly so, again, in the parental makeup, but also from a partner's perspective. So you will find that if you've been on the receiving end of narcissistic behaviour, you are physically and emotionally absolutely whacked out and exhausted. So what does a narcissist look like? What do they look like? What are these traits? Well, we have the official version. Of course, there is the official version, and that is defined by the DSM, okay, which gives 9 traits. That's in terms of a mental health disorder. So narcissistic personality disorder is an actual way of looking at things that is understood as a personality disorder. Now, as a strong element of the personality disorder, it's regarded as fairly rare, okay, because that particular definition makes it very obvious that something is really quite a myth. So what I'm going to do is just quickly go through what those 9 traits are that are defined by the DSM, and then I'm going to add to you some of the ones that you will more readily recognize and the ones that perhaps you've been more on the receiving end on. Okay, so in terms of the official version, number 1 is a grandiose sense of self-importance. So the narcissist is the one who has to be number 1. So for you, as an intuitive sensitive person, that affects you greatly, because you begin to wonder where your sense of self is and you start to lose boundaries. Okay, so it means that if you've grown up in a narcissistic environment, you struggle now hugely with boundaries, where you begin and where someone else ends. As an intuitive sensitive, that impacts you massively in terms of taking on other people's emotions as though they're yours to deal with, your problem. Number 2 is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. How that impacts you as an intuitive sensitive person, if you have been around someone with a very strong narcissistic personality, you will find that they are completely preoccupied with belittling you and making you look small and making them look big, and helping to sabotage any of your efforts to around self-improvement. So one of the classic examples is that if you're trying to lose weight, the narcissist will say, oh yes, you're way too fat, of course you need to lose weight. And then you say, oh, I've been doing this. Instead of helping you with that, they'll then start saying, oh, well, one big fat chocolate cake won't do any harm, will it? And they'll be encouraging you to continue with whatever behaviour it is that you are trying to resolve, because you couldn't be possibly more beautiful or shine greater than they can. So they'll do whatever they can to then make sure you sabotage, making it your fault. Number 3 is that there is a belief they are special, unique, and can only associate with other special people. So as an example, for you as an intuitive sensitive, when you felt excluded and not part of the clique, this is a strong example of something where it's led by the narcissist. So if you felt not part of your family, you know, for people who've come from a very strong narcissistic background, and that you felt that you're the misfit, or somehow you're not acceptable, again, this may be because you have been around a strong narcissistic character. Number 4 is that they require excessive admiration. So for you as an intuitive, sensitive person, it's always about them. They're the one that has to be admired. If you look great or fantastic, they can maybe make some kind of comment, but it's normally got some barbed thing tacked on the end to just make sure that pull you down and put you in your place. Number 5 is a sense of entitlement or favourable treatment or automatic compliance with their expectations. So how that impacts you as an intuitive sensitive, if you've sat in a restaurant with somebody who is very strongly narcissistic, and it's all this and it's all this, you know, they want something that is not on the menu, and clearly not something that kind of restaurant does, but it's a disgrace that I can't have that here. And you're sitting there cringing in embarrassment, going, oh my God, why is that necessary? Again, narcissistic traits. Number 6 is takes advantage of others to achieve their own ends. If you've ever felt climbed over, dragged over, used for your own, something that you have in terms of your characteristics or traits, or someone's trying to pass off your work as their own, narcissistic. Number 7 is lacks empathy, unwilling to recognise or identify with the feelings or needs of others. So, perfect example for you as an intuitive sensitive, you are always very concerned with making sure everybody else feels fine. Okay, partly because it impacts you very strongly, so you feel that strongly in your solar plexus region, so you feel a constant kind of low level of anxiety if everyone's not happy, because you can feel the undertone, you can feel that sort of rage sometimes, certainly in a narcissist, under the surface, even if they're ta-da on the outside, you can feel it. So you very strongly identify with other people's feelings and their needs and requirements over the top. So a narcissist won't even vaguely really be considering someone else's feelings or their needs. So if you are in that situation, you find yourself saying a lot, do you know what? I know exactly what everybody else wants, but no one ever asks me. You're in that kind of environment. Number 8 is they are envious of others and believe others are envious of them. Remember, these 9 that I'm giving you right now, these are the official versions, okay, of how when someone is narcissistic. So in terms of personality disorder. So envious of others and believes others are envious of them. So this is, if you've come from a foundation where you've been embarrassed as an intuitive sensitive, you thought, oh God, that maybe you got a parent that was always trying to drag someone else down who they thought was doing better than them, or make comments about it, or be detrimental and non-encouraging, and you think, oh my God, when I'm older and I'm doing something that I feel, as a child, you're thinking that I feel that is me, am I going to get dragged down like this? Am I going to be pulled down like this? I'm panicking, so therefore you then decide never to overstretch yourself beyond the capabilities of the narcissistic parent. Then you definitely have had a foundation that's had a lot of that as your experience, okay? And yet they still think that people are also envious of them. So they're envious of others, and then they think they're envious of that. So you've been taught to be highly suspicious of everything and everybody, and the only person you can trust is them. And that if you share that outside of their immediate foundation, then you are dishonourable and you risk absolute expulsion and rejection. Narcissistic behaviour. Okay? Number 9 is arrogance, haughty behaviour or attitudes, which is better than. There's this undertone of, well, I'm better than, or, oh, no, I'm much less than. But really, it's all about better than. And again, as an intuitive sensitive, you will tend to be somebody who, because of you've got this, strongly empathic nature and sense of connection, you'll want to find yourself kind of connecting with people, but you may have been taught to reject people on basis or all kinds of basis, and rather than feel yourself in that kind of essence of non-judgment. And so over the years you've had to learn non-judgment, yet you feel then strangely disconnected from the people who are your family and you're meant to love, kind of thing. Again, if you've had that as a foundational experience. So those are, the 9 official traits as far as narcissistic personalities and as far as a disorder is concerned. So if we add in some of the unofficial traits, which I would say are more the realities of being around narcissistic abuse, and I will use that word, it's a strong word to use, but it's true that it is abuse. The picture is a little bit more revealing. So we can add in that the narcissist will react to criticism with absolute steaming rage, shame or humiliation. So that shame or the humiliation is very kind of closely linked together, which is to then absolutely then give you a mouthful of your shame. So they're really good at finding your Achilles heel and poisoning you with it. Or if you, as an intuitive sensitive, have this really ultra strong fear of humiliation, it's likely that you've been round a significant person who's of a narcissistic temperament, because that will be your big fear of being humiliated. So the reaction to criticism with rage, shame, or trying to humiliate you will be excessive. It's not from the perspective of feeling a bit, was that due? It's much more, even if it's very constructive and it's something that can be adjusted and changed, they will take it as a ways and means of absolutely trying to destroy someone in some instances. And they are absolute masters of the silent treatment. Some situations it can be that the silent treatment can go on for weeks. I've heard of situations where the silent treatment can go on for months. And a perfect example of this is if you've been in a relationship and they showed you all of this huge amounts of interest first, straight up, very, very nice, and then disappeared on you after you felt very used, and then you had nothing to do with them, and then you came back, and then all of a sudden they come back with this nicer than nice, oh, hello, so nothing has happened, narcissistic traits, okay? You'll also find that they unashamedly use people. So if you felt very, very used, absolutely this may have been more of your reality. And they never, this is the key one to remember, they never apologise. Ever. Apologising, as far as they are concerned, is for wimps. Only wimps apologise. They never apologise. They never admit to any wrongdoing. It's always your fault. And they lie. They don't tell little lies, they tell huge whoppers. Huge, monumental, whopping great lies that you think, what? Where? Why? And it creates a lot of confusion as far as you're concerned, but it's normal. So you begin to question which one's lying, you or them. And they'll only say something nice to you. And obviously, there's different levels of narcissistic behaviours, but generally, some of these can be a lot more subtle, or some of them can be really powerfully obvious. So generally, if you look around and you think, well, they only actually say something nice when they want something, or that they've been behaving badly and then you've kind of gone, well, I can't deal with this anymore, and ignored it, and sort of thought, well, I'll just pull myself out of here because it's just too uncomfortable. And they realise that you've sort of gone off and they need to do something to draw you back in. So that's when they then start saying something nice. In relationships, a strong narcissist will cheat regularly. Okay, they cheat very regularly, as though it's part of the norm, and of course it will be your fault. It won't ever be their responsibility. It'll be your fault for that reason. And adding in there the lies, it will be absolutely powerfully strong for them to completely deny it, and then you wonder whether you're the one who's gone mad. They will also tear whatever is important to you apart. Absolutely rip it to shreds. So something that is important to you, they'll rip it to shreds if they feel that it's something that's going to upset you at some level or another. Or it may be quite very obvious if there's more of a kind of sadistic part to it, or it may be really quite subtle, but it still hurts you, and you'll say, oh, don't be so ridiculous, oversensitive. They will also project onto others their hidden view of themselves, and so this is a really powerful one. This is a very powerful one that can destroy you, but when you see it for what it is, it becomes something you can go, interesting, right. And so you then start to realise it's not something that you take on, it's something that you can observe rather than taking it on as something that is a direct reflection of you. So they'll project onto others their hidden view of themselves, and then they'll tell you it's for your own good. Okay, so they may say something as an example of, well, you know sometimes that you're really cruel. They'll say that to you, and you'll think, and I'm telling you this for your own good. I'm telling you this for your own good, so you can buck up your ideas. They may say something like, you're too disorganised. You're so disorganised, and you're so disorganised and inefficient. Very disorganised and inefficient you are. Really? That's what they're saying about themselves, and you think, well, actually, am I disorganised and inefficient? I think I'm actually quite good at that. And they say, well, I'm telling you this, it's for your own good. So it's for your own good, you've got to buck your ideas up as far as that's concerned, because you'll never get anywhere in life if you don't. Really, it's their own view of themselves, but they don't want to own it, so they project it on to somebody else, and you, as an intuitive sensitive, are an easy target as far as they're concerned, because your desire to be approved of to a certain degree, but also thinking, oh, well, actually, I do take responsibility for myself. Am I like that? Maybe I am. They will also only want to do things that interest them. So if you've been around somebody who never actually asks you what you want to do, or takes some kind of level of enjoyment in what interests you, especially so it's an easy one to detect early on in relationships. If they only want to do things that interest them, you probably have got issues ahead, whereas they don't want to join in with some of the things that interest you. Not because they are suddenly interested in those things that interest you, but because they want to be with you, and they want to share something that's important to you and have an understanding of that. They are charismatic also in a lot of instances in the beginning. They ask lots of questions, show a lot of interest, show a lot of interest in you. Before long, though, their questions are actually kind of lip service, and this is where you kind of get drawn in, definitely as an intuitive sensitive, which is you're not used to someone really being interested in you. You're used to you being interested in them, in terms of asking things about themselves and their own lives, but genuinely being interested in what the answers are. And so this is how a lot of intuitive sensitives get caught out as far as the narcissistic traits are concerned, because they'll show a charismatic interest in you, first up, asking you things about yourself, making you feel kind of sort of special about that. But before long, the questions become lip service, okay? And they get back to, well, you know what? Me. But they'll be saying to you, but it's all about you. It's you. It's all about you. We have to do things that you. And you think, what am I this bad person? Am I this person who only thinks of themselves? And they'll tell you how selfish you are, how you don't understand, how you don't understand what they need, and how you only understand your own needs, all of this kind of thing. And this is not to say, if you're wondering and you think, well, actually, I do find myself saying this, but I find myself saying this when I've come to this level of kind of really strong frustration, and I'm actually saying this to someone who I think is a narcissist. So does that make me a narcissist? No, it doesn't make you a narcissist. What you're then doing is that you are then trying to communicate after a whole, big bucket load of frustration or a lot of selfishness over a long period of time, or cruelty or comments or something along those lines, where you feel that you can't take it anymore. So you try and bite back to a certain degree, but then all you find is it's turned round back on you, and it's completely and utterly your fault. That is a narcissist's perspective, where you can't then create an even level of communication and pleasantries in terms of how you resolve and solve something, because narcissists and people with strong narcissistic traits never really seek to solve anything unless it's only within their own interests. So where does narcissism come from? Well, this is something that we now need to discuss.